Welcome back to the Paganini 5 Challenge. You know what day it is today? It's day 5. Yeah, 5 meaning the 5th Paganini Caprice, the 5th day of the Paganini 5 Challenge. Today is an exciting day because we are going to get into the heart of Paganini's 5th Caprice. We are going to be covering Ricochet bowing, off the string strokes in particular, which encompass Ricochet and Sautillé and Spiccato. For those of you who've been here with me on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, thanks for coming back for day 5. I think you're going to like day 5. This is getting really exciting. I'm pretty excited myself, okay, because I wish I had someone who had walked me through Ricochet and walked me through the Paganini Caprice Ricochet. Okay, let me ask a question. Who has watched my Spiccato tutorials on my website or YouTube? If you haven't, that's okay. You can definitely catch them all on my website. You go to my website, lynnkuo.com, and you can actually go right to the tutorials, and I have them all laid out for you. I've got lots of tutorials there for you. So if you go to my website, you will catch them. We are going to be doing a really fast run through. There are 4 main things that I think about when it comes to off the string strokes. Now, this is going to apply to Paganini 5th Caprice Ricochet. Number 1 is the height of the bow bouncing. How high does the bow bounce? Really high? Okay. The slower the bounce, the higher your bow stick is going to go. Now, if I want to go faster, you see the height is decreasing? See that? The faster the number of notes, the lower the bounce. Now, you see I'm not making a sound yet. I just want to demonstrate height first. Okay, the faster the ricochet, the lower the bounce. Okay, so that's one variable in off the string strokes, okay? Next one is where in the bow, okay? So I call this where in your middle zone. So the bounciest part of your bow is in what I call the middle zone, all right? It may be in the lower part of the middle zone, it may be a little higher in the middle zone, but the middle zone is where you're going to get your bounce. So even if you're a beginner, you can definitely do this. In fact, if you wanted, just for fun, you can even take a pen and just see the properties. Feel, whoa, the properties. That's very bouncy, isn't it? If you just try that, bounce, bounce, bounce. This is extremely bouncy. So I'm used to using 2 fingers. You can see this is really quite bouncy, right? It's the same principle. You take a longer thing, a little bit more complicated, yes, but it can still bounce, right? It may feel a little different, but you see how I'm doing in the middle. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start. Height and where. So let's try, pick a string, any string you like. Let's try the G string. If you're a violist, you can try C string or G string. Okay, so let's try this. You can try this with me. This tempo here. 1/8 note, let's say, per beat. Okay, now let's try a little lower towards the frog. You hear how the sound is changing on my end? It sounds a bit nasty. Now let's go up to the other side of that middle zone, the upper part of the middle zone. Listen to the sound. You hear how the sound changes? So what I am doing right now is exploring. I'm getting to know my middle zone. Okay, what does it sound like? What does it feel like? So become friends with your middle zone. Get to know your own bow. I got a question actually on Instagram about how do we adjust to different bows. Let me prove my point. This is a different bow. Okay, this is my student bow. If I had to get used to a new bow, I'm just going to grab a new bow. This is a different bow. I'm going to get used to my middle zone. Well, let me try G string again. Okay, I'm going to feel this stick. Every stick is going to differ. Oh, there is not bad of a sound, okay? Get to know your stick. What are the properties, okay? So I'm going to go back to my original bow. So we have height. We've got where in the middle zone. Okay, the next bow factor in spiccato is tilt. Okay, tilt of the bow. Whether you have a flat hair, if you take your eyes to your hair, is it really flat? Now try it with me on the G string or D string, C string, E string, whatever you like. If you do a flat hair, notice how bouncy it feels and percussive it sounds. Very flat hair. Now gently, I want you to roll your stick in between your fingers. You're going to roll your stick. So that's a tilt, a bow tilt. Not tilt as in this, but tilt as in rouler. Rouler is a French term, meaning you're rolling the stick, okay? So if you tilt, now try the same thing. Okay, now the sound is a little bit more suitable for a brushing, more gentle stroke. If you flatten the hair, it starts to get a little bouncier. Okay, so this is very useful information when you're doing any off the string stroke, whether it's spiccato Sautillé, or Ricochet. All three of these off the string strokes will be influenced by tilt. So let's review. Height of your bounce, okay? Where in your middle zone, from the lower part of your middle zone to the middle part or to the upper part, and as well the tilt, okay? So the fourth factor of off the string strokes is where you are in terms of contact point. What do I mean by contact point? Between the bridge here and between the edge of your fingerboard here, or there, okay? What you consider is, let's call these 5 zones, 5 lanes on your highway. So right here on this lane is near your bridge is lane number 1, contact point number 1. Okay, the edge of your fingerboard is contact point number 5. In the middle is contact point number 3, and then in between you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it depends. If I'm doing off the string strokes, okay, let's say on the lowest string, I would move your contact point out to more of the fingerboard side. Now you see my sound has actually improved from when I had it here at contact point 3. You hear this? The sound is scratchy, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to move that contact point out. I'm not going to change any other bow factor. You hear how my sound has changed. Now this is important for Ricochet too. Okay, so we are going to get there. Now, if I try the same, let's say here on the E string, I'm going to stay here. Let's say I'm out on contact point 5 on the E string, or your A string if you're viola. You can hear that didn't work so well. Now I'm going to bring it into contact point 4. I'm trying not to change anything. I'm going to bring it to 3. To me, I'm getting a better sound here around contact 3. Let me move to 2. Oh, I caught a scratch at one point. If I bring it to 1, that is definitely raspy. Okay, so you hear the difference? Okay, so we've got 4 of these bow variables. If you want to review all of this, definitely check out my 4 tutorials on Spiccato. Okay, you're eager to get to Ricochet, right? So we are going to get right to Ricochet. I know this is what you all been waiting for. This is the trick of Paganini's 5th Caprice, isn't it? And many violinists, including soloists, elect not to do this fancy bowing, okay? But we're going to try it, okay? So, I mean, eventually we're going to get to... Okay, we are eventually going to get there. And I'm going to take you step by step on how I got here. It's not perfect yet. I just started it. So this is what I started to do, okay? Let's call this the 5 steps to 5th Caprice. 5 steps to Paganini's 5th Caprice. We are going to start with what I call, in my Spiccato video, the wild bounce method, okay? So just as we talked about taking, let's say, a pen, if you're, be careful, of course, you see how this is quite a wild bounce? This is not one approach that you can use to learn Spiccato, okay? The other one is what I call from the string approach, where you start from the string, and then it starts to come off. Okay, this one is called the wild bounce approach. So let's say I go to the G string. I start off with this one bounce. You can do this with me, okay? Here, join me. Let's do one bounce each on a down bow, one on an up bow. So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2. Up, down, up. Now, as you're doing this, notice height. Okay, experiment with the height. Feel it. Now, notice tilt. Flat hair or tilted. Which one works the best? Just keep with me in this tempo. Okay, now notice contact point. Where are you in contact point? Are you at 5? Are you at 4? And which contact point sounds the best? I'm going to move it in. I'm too raspy, so I'm going to move back out. Show it better. Okay, so you're joining me here, right? Now, what else are we talking about? Contact point, height, tilt. Have I forgotten one? Okay, you can also think about length of bow too. So if you're thinking a little bit length, you hear how the sound is actually lengthening out at this tempo anyway. Now, here we go. We've got 1 bounce Ricochet. Let's add 2 bounces. Can we do that? Actually, let's do it. Let's do this faster. try that with me. Just feel the ricochet on a down, up, down, up, down, up. This is my wild bounce method. It's really easy. Now, while you're doing this, you are not trying to control with the on the bone with that forearm muscles. What you're just doing is literally like you're dropping a drumstick onto a drum head. Wham, like a drum. I hope there are no percussionists out there thinking that I'm a percussionist, because I'm not. But I'm taking it as if it's just a drumstick onto a drum head, and you're just letting that fall. Try to be as relaxed as possible. All right. So now we're just doing 2. Now let's see if we can join those 2 together. We're going to do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now this is how we build spiccato. 1, 2, 1, 2. You can do this with me on any string you like. Here, 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 anywhere you like. Listen to the quality of your sound. We're just doing down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now we're going to do, ready for this? We're going to add 2 downs and 1 up. So it's going to look like this. So it's a wild bounce. You're just dropping the stick. Okay, so I didn't get quite a good sound. That tells me that I had too much verticality, too much height. You hear that, how percussive it was? So if it's too high, I'm going to bring down the height and increase the length, the horizontal. Listen to the difference. That sounds more pleasant, doesn't it? You can try that yourself. Try a little lower and a little bit more horizontal. If I hear a scratch, if you hear a scratch, try a little, still even more, brushing horizontally. And again, try not to control with this. In fact, I would love for you to think from this bone, the humerus bone. I would like to actually draw your attention to maybe behind here, the tricep. If you put your attention back there, then you know what happens? This is one trick, okay? In the ricochet and in spiccato. If you draw your attention to maybe behind here, guess what happens? When I put my attention to back here, what I'm doing is I'm drawing my attention away from this half of my arm. When I do that, then all of a sudden these muscles, the forearm extensor and flexor muscles, I'm not trying to control them as much. And I'm not trying to control all the little tiny muscles in my hand. And then what happens is this becomes very responsive, okay? That's what we want. Okay, we want all of this to become, you see how my arm looks nice and relaxed? That's what I ideally want. We want the right balance of flexibility but control. But I often find that in off the string strokes, people try to control and it starts to look like a claw. Okay, that's when we start running into problems. So what I do to think how to relax that is to actually think about behind here and also inside here, inside the armpit actually. The shoulder blade back here is where it connects to this arm bone deep, deep, deep inside here. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking about. So we are at now just the 2 plus 1, 2, down, down, up. Okay, 3, and down, down, up, down, down, up. Now, we're going to convert this, if you're doing along with me, into a triplet. It's going to look like this. Down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. Now, as you're doing that, think relaxed armpit. Okay, you know what? I would actually draw your attention to my string crossings tutorial. Again, that's on my website. I tell you about the biggest left arm bow secret, and this is that secret. If you want to refresh your memories, go to my string crossings tutorial on YouTube. Let's try this again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So what I'm doing is I'm giving the first down bow a bit of a kick, right? Just like you're hitting a drumstick on a drum head. The first hit will be the hardest, or the most force, and then the second one is kind of a ricochet effect. Yum, 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 okay? Can the difference between sounding points in ricochet be generalized to all violins and strings, or is it for each to find their own differences? That's a really great question. I think, generally speaking, you can definitely apply these principles. So generally speaking, a lower string or a longer string, you will need a contact point that is a little further to the fingerboard. A higher string, okay, like an A string or E string, will need a contact point that's a little bit closer to the bridge. For me, it works about contact point 3 in the middle. The shorter your string length, so if you stop the string with your finger here, there, oh, I mean, let's say here. Okay, so my contact point where I am is definitely at a 3. But if I were to do that here, I actually do it here. So that now you see how my contact point is at about 5. But your question is excellent because my instrument really has a sluggish G string, very sluggish. And the only way I can get my G string to speak on that ricochet is if I move my bow way out. Okay, so your instrument and my instrument might vary, but in general, we're going to be roughly in the ballpark. So yes, it applies to, I think it's basically physics, but definitely work with what tools you have. So whether it's this bow or that bow, you will have to get familiar with your own equipment. You know, it's kind of like if you own a dishwasher and you know every dishwasher you have to stack it a certain way, then you get to start to know your dishwasher. You know where to put certain dishes and where they get really clean and where the water can't reach them and some of the dishes don't get cleaned. So you start to know your dishwasher. Does anyone relate to that dishwasher analogy? Okay, so we are, which bow do I have today? Okay, I think it's the right bow. So we are on triplets now. Join me if you like. Down, 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 up, down, down, up. Okay, open strings if you must. I definitely practice open strings. So I'm feeling very relaxed here, okay? We're trying not to control here. I'm trying not to. Having super relaxed, okay? How can you do ricochet without putting too much pressure? Thank you for this question. Okay, without putting too much pressure. Again, so I'm thinking relaxation, relaxed in this joint of my arm. This is actually a joint, okay, where you need to watch my string crossings tutorial and also my vibrato tutorial where there's actually a skeleton and you'll actually see the socket is kind of cupped right here and it's actually right here, kind of deep in here. If you feel around there, that's inside of your bone. The end of this bone here, the humerus bone, looks like this, and then the shoulder blade will cup it. So this is the area that I picture. This is the most mobile joint in the body. It can do this, it can do this, it can rotate, it can do so many things. So if I imagine that this has a lot of range of motion, Luke, okay, then I picture how this is really relaxed. Once I picture that this is relaxed, the rest of my arm feels more relaxed. When the arm feels more relaxed, then I'm not going to be so prone to putting too much pressure. When I saw Alexander Markov play the caprices, I thought he was using the bow angle in some way to sustain longer chains of ricochet. Is it because of the change in elasticity of the strings as the sound point, contact point changes? Yeah, I think you might be right. You know, it's funny. I'm not really big into physics, and yet my father graduated with a master's degree in physics. It didn't transfer to me quite clearly. It has to be, yeah. So what we are doing is actually, yes, we are playing with the physics. So if we look at the bow hair, I'm not going to touch my bow hair, but you see how the hair gives. The stick will give 2. We're playing with 2 springy things. This is springy. This is springy. And if you look, this is springy too. So absolutely, I'm sure Alexander Markov knows exactly how he works with his tools, right? So we're going to look at that. So let's return back to our triplet. Okay, I'm sure we could all do this. Down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. At this point, it should feel nice and comfortable. Okay, now are we game to try down, 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 up? All right, we're going to add one more. How are we doing? Are you relaxed? Are you even? Is your hand soft? Are you feeling your armpit? Are you feeling your tricep? Okay, how about we try a high string? Feel the difference. Ready? And does it feel different? Which contact point are you using? Where in the middle zone are you? Okay, if we pause here for a second, I hope you're doing well. I had to adjust where in the middle zone I was when I went to the E string. Okay, let me show you. On the D string, I don't know if you can see. I wish I had a little twist tie. I would put it right there. Okay, let's say it's right there. Oh no, I have to go a little higher. Okay, so this is where I am in my bow, in my middle zone, the upper part of my middle zone. Take a note where yours is working. Now, if I move that exact space to the E, and I'm not going to move. Okay, I'm in the same contact point. To me, I don't know if you can hear, but this tone that I'm getting is a little bit raspy. Okay, to me, it's a little bit raspy. What does that tell me? I can change 4 variables, right? Height, where in the middle zone, tilt, or contact point. What I'm going to change is where in the middle zone. I'm just going to move up, okay, up a little bit, just about this much, not that much, just a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so maybe I moved that much, a little bit more than I said. At this tempo, anyway. So I'm really quite high. See how much higher I went? Okay, so I am really getting to know my bow. I tell you a little secret. This bow has beautiful sound with this instrument. However, I was really disappointed compared to my previous bow, which was a Dodd. This is a Jean-Jacques Martin, if you want to say it like an American or a Canadian. This bow does not bounce very well at all. And I've been frustrated with that. I was really quite disappointed. Let's try this second bow. This is a very basic student bow. Oh, this one, this is jumpier. It's telling me you want to jump more. Oh, this is very jumpy in comparison, okay? So get to know your tools. You're going to have to work with your tools, but the principles that we are talking about translate. So now that we're into first we started with 1, okay, that was step 1. Then we did step 2, or, that's right, triplets. Now we're in step 3. And like I said 5 steps to 5th caprice, right? What's the 4th step? This is how I went into 5th caprice. Then you start practicing scales. Who here is following me on Instagram, Facebook? If you have you seen my scale routine videos? So we covered steps 1, 2, and 3. Step 1 was 1 bounce. Step 2 was 2 bounces, or a triplet. Okay. Step 3 was 3 plus 1, tap, 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 on open strings. Sorry, I can't talk and play at the same time. Okay, step 4 is practicing scales. All right, so here we go. If you just want to do 1 string, just do 1 string. Okay, this is how I built up my Paganini 5 Ricochet. That's step 4. Okay, so now step 5, all right, is to do ricochet note on every single new note. You know, all of our bodies are built so differently. Our muscles are wired differently. Our nerves are wired differently to our brain. Some people find up bow staccato extremely easy, and when they do, I can't even play this. Yeah, so some people do up bow staccato in certain ways, and then some people do it this way, some people do it that way. You will have to find which way works for you. Sometimes I wonder, how do we decide on which factors to change? Yeah, that's a really excellent question. So let's say, so what I'm listening for when you practice, okay, this is what I cover in my How to Practice Like a Ninja course. So what you're doing first is to listen for what you don't like, okay? You're asking, then how do we decide? So what you're first listening for are clues. Okay, when you practice like a ninja, first of all, you're looking for clues. You become a detective, and your detective has to be very astute at picking up clues. For example, okay, so I heard something that I wasn't quite happy with. You have to be observant enough to know what you're trying to fix. So I'm hearing 1 note that I don't like. What was it? So the first question I ask is, what? This, that D. I didn't like it. Then I ask, as a detective, I say, why do I not like it? If I'm not sure, then I need to go back and play it again with my detective ears. Okay, so actually that was actually better. But let's say the D was not a good sound. Okay, so that's what I want to fix. Let's say that my bounce is, it sounds like that. So how do we know what factor to fix? Okay, that's when I become a scientist and say, okay, we need to devise some experiments. So I'm going to come up with some drills. Okay, I try some of these drills. I go back to, let's say, the 1 bounce, the 2 bounce, 3 bounce. I experiment with height. Okay, experiment with different contact points, experiment with the tilt. You have to actually know these variables, and then, like a scientist, like a test tube, you try this test tube, you try that test tube. This is the process of practicing. So you're basically taking a very measured approach to your practice. So you're not wasting any time trying to figure out what's going wrong. I don't know what's going wrong. I'm repeating and repeating and repeating. Just stop and say, well, Lynn talked about 4 variables. Maybe I'll start there. Okay, let's talk about 4 variables. We learned about the middle zone, the height, the tilt, and the contact point. So if you're not sure, and sometimes I'm not sure too when I practice, I go through a couple of these steps and I start to experiment. And then I'll start to combine. Maybe I test tube A and test tube C. If I put the 2 together, let's see what happens there. And then that's my practice session. And then like a good proper scientist and a detective, I have a practice journal and I write my notes. Okay, then I write my notes in the practice journal. This is the sign of a good practicer. So that's an answer to your question. You experiment with the factors, and then you start to find patterns. Oh, I noticed that when I do... look at that. My ricochet is actually better when I move out, but when I start here, it's actually better here. So if I'm paying good attention, I will notice with my detective wits, okay, that my contact point works better on higher strings, closer to the bridge, but further away from the bridge on lower strings. Then you just start taking notes. And when you start taking notes, you gain experience. And when you gain experience, then you become faster at fixing all your practice problems. Are you giving the bow separate energy for each note in the same bow of the ricochet? Or are you giving energy only to the first note and letting that energy cause the next ricochet notes? I appreciate this question so much. This is dependent on speed. If you were to do... Yes, I'm giving an energy on every single note, and I am doing this, okay? Now, that can be useful if you're only going to play at that tempo. The equivalent in an off-the-string stroke is the equivalent to spiccato. Spiccato is an off-the-string stroke where there's an energetic impulse to every stroke. Again, review my spiccato tutorials. I talk more about this, okay? Sautillé, on the other hand, is what I consider 1 energetic impulse per 2. So that the bow starts to jump on its own. So similarly, in ricochet, the impulse is mainly on the first. Okay, so then you start to get to know, I had to move my bow up a little further. The faster I go, the higher up I need to go up in the middle zone. Okay, let's try here. Now, let's say I want to go faster. You see I'm moving up this way. And the height is decreasing. And let's try a little faster. Now the height is very, very, very low now. So your question is, am I giving impulse to 1 note? Yes, kind of yes. Again, it's a balance, a delicate balance for the entire arm structure. Okay, so I'm feeling a lot of this humerus bone. And then this becomes kind of like a paintbrush effect. Almost as if you're holding, pretend this is super, super long. As if it's almost kind of like a robotic arm. Let's see. Okay, so then you kind of get into a robotic action. And then all of these fine muscles, fine knuckles, they become like a slinky. They're able to do whatever you need to break, to shock absorb whatever is happening whenever you change a string. Okay, so all of this is very finely balanced, and it does take practice. It sounds like higher pitches correlates with needing to ricochet closer to the bridge. Yes, that's what I have definitely found. And I have played this in masterclass for Lynn Kuo, and yes, we have definitely come to that conclusion. Okay. I've noticed some soloists use a markedly loose tension on their bow hair. How does bow tension factor into the equation? Another excellent question. I find if I have very loose tension, I don't get very much bounce. Again, my bow doesn't bounce very well to begin with. So if I don't have, okay, I just loosened my bow. Can you see this? Okay, let me loosen it. Okay, that's really, really loose. I don't know if you can see. There. Really quite loose. Let's see. Ooh. one tempo. You see how it starts to smooth out? That didn't work. I'm going to tighten it back up. You can observe while I tighten my bow up. Okay, there's my optimal usually. Ooh. Okay, so I wasn't quite happy with that tonal production. Let me go too tight. Okay, it's really going too tight now. Ooh, that's super tight. Wow, that really bounces much better. So you know what? For me and this bow, I need more tension because like I said, this bow doesn't like to bounce. So that is an interesting question. Like I said, the rule that I actually mentioned in one of my Spiccato tutorials is get to know your bow, your instrument, your tools. Okay, everyone's tools are different. Like I said, it's like your dishwasher. Get to know your dishwasher. How do you change the dynamics when you do Ricochet? That's a great question. I remember having a lesson in Toronto with the great violinist Erica Rom, and we were working on off the string strokes. And she said it perfectly. The only way you can really crescendo in off the string strokes is to use more bow. So unfortunately, that Ricochet is a very picky stroke, isn't it? So it's a very small amount of bow on that one note. Pick, pick, pick. The only way to get more volume is to pull more bow. So the stroke will still be off, but I'm pulling more horizontally. So the more horizontal is going to get more volume. But how do you do that inside of a Ricochet? Well, remember we talked about horizontal versus vertical. If you use more horizontal, you might be able to get it. So here, I don't know if you noticed, it goes up higher. Look, I'm almost to the tip. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. You can change where in the bow you are. Sorry, my bow needs to be tighter. You know, in this Caprice, it's going to be really hard to manipulate dynamics. So I think if that's going to be a problem and dynamics is harder, you can do what you've already actually been doing, and I've seen your videos, is to manipulate timing. See what I did with my voice? I manipulated the timing of how I deliver my notes. Okay, so if you manipulate timing, look how interesting it becomes, even if I can't manipulate dynamics. Okay, so we're going to use the palette, a musicality palette. Okay, so I do talk about musicality, and like I said, I have a whole suite of violin ninja courses coming, and I have a whole entire class on how to handle musicality. Okay, so that was the Paganini 5 in 5 steps, the Ricochet. You start with one bounce, okay, on open strings. Then you start with a 2 down, down, up, okay, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. Then you add a third bounce, down, 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 up, down, 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 up. Then you're doing all of those on open strings. Then you move into down, 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 up. Oh, I should not say, I should play instead. So you're going in, and then you increase speed. Okay, then you're going to go into level 5. Oh. Okay, so that's in 5 steps. Basically, you go from level 1 to level 5, and then eventually you apply it. Okay, there was that bit of timing that I was trying to trick people into thinking that I did a decrescendo. What about Ricochet on string changes? Okay, fine. Well, let's talk about that. This is why this Caprice is so darn difficult. It's because of the string changes. You are absolutely right. Okay, so now that we've talked about the different contact points, remember about the 4 basic variables in Spiccato? Contact point is going to be affected by which string you're on, as well as the length of the string. If you stop the string length changes. So the shorter the string length, the more you're going to move the bow contact point in. So this is where it gets to, you know how you play a video game Okay, not that I play video games, but you know how you progress from level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. This is like level 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, getting through all of these different string crossings. So, what was all of these string crossings are going to be challenging. So I would definitely look at, okay, let's say there's one note on the G string and 3 notes on the D string. This is where I would practice in chunks. Remember we talked about in day 3? Yes, day 3 was how to build up speed and accuracy. We were building this chunk. Let's pretend we're just playing this one chunk. So here I'm just going to use my detective skills, my scientist skills, and then the third person that we are using or becoming when we practice is the athlete. The athlete is the one who performs. So I've mastered my G string, and I want to master the D string until I'm happy with the sound. That's one chunk that I've mastered. Okay, so remember how we said that we're going to practice Paganini 5, whether it's 5 notes, 5 measures, or 5 lines. I, for example, just practiced 4 notes. I want to practice beautifully 4 notes. Now, let's say I want to add the next chunk. Oh, look at that, a D, S, O. Isn't that fun? Okay, also a grouping opportunity, a G, O. Okay. So I'm learning the properties of the G string and the D string, but then what happens to the, right? So I gain to know how this behaves on my instrument and my bow. Okay, so I basically learn one note by note, or one chunk by one chunk. If you have a string crossing, take that one string crossing, isolate it, make a chunk out of it, make a GO, a grouping opportunity. Okay, then inside the grouping opportunity, determine if you have any DSOs, double stop opportunities. Build the fluency inside that one chunk by understanding where the string crossing is. Okay, practice that one string crossing difficulty. Then join a chunk on. And then you're going to apply what we learned in day 3 about bridging the chunks and then staggering the start note of inside each chunk. Little bit by little bit by little bit, I guarantee you will eventually learn an entire line. A line will become 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, until you learn a whole caprice. It's like a video game. You got to get to level 100, but you got to start level 1. Is there a specific thing to keep in mind for maintaining the stroke during quick string crosses? I find I struggle a lot with this. I think that question is answered by exactly what I said. You're going to have to just feel what you need between strings. Probably, I would say, being conscious of, again, the relaxation in your arm. So this can go back to the video, my tutorial on string crossings. If we review the last tip about string crossings, okay, is to maintain a very loose arm. That's probably what I might recommend. Okay, go back to bow arm basics. So go ahead and review my string crossings tutorial. I talk more about that. So the ricochet / spiccato comes from the upper arm movement. Does it come from the biceps, or just make sure the biceps are relaxed? Excellent question. I think what I might do is point you to my spiccato tutorials. I do explain everything. What happens is there's no one thing that controls spiccato. And I do explain this in that tutorial. So I will, I think the best thing for me to say is to use, you're using the entire arm structure. Not one part of your arm is doing one part of the spiccato or ricochet. It's the entire thing. So if you imagine that all these joints are like slinkies of some sort, right? They all have a range of motion. This has a lot of range of motion, right? This has a range of motion. See, this has a range of motion. And these joints inside here all have, sorry, the sun is really in my eyes. These all have ranges of motion as well. So all of this works together. You see how everything's possible with my arm? So I would invite you to actually experiment trying to do certain things with your bow. Okay, and I explain all that in my spiccato tutorial. Does bow hand finger shape or height change when doing spiccato? Not really. Not really. Again, when you have a whole arm, a concept of the whole arm, and that way, because sometimes a big mistake I see, and you're going to see I have that in my tutorials on spiccato, big spiccato mistakes, the most common spiccato mistakes. Height and shape do not really change. And why? It's because they're actually responding. They're responding to the entire arm. They work in concert. Like I said, it's kind of like the concept of a jellyfish or an octopus arm. Okay, not one part of the tentacle of an octopus is moving and this does not move. The whole thing starts here and will cause the motion of the entire octopus tentacle. Another analogy they use is a paintbrush. So this is a paintbrush, and the ends of your paintbrush are bristles. I hope I answered your basic questions. Like I said, I talk way more about bow technique in my spiccato tutorials. And actually, I have, like I said, upcoming violin ninja courses coming up, and they go really, really deep into all of this technique, left hand technique, and spiccato sautillé off the string stuff. So my ninja course will be actually very much deeper in detail. Okay, like normal, post any revelations you have, any practice wins, your journal entries, whatever they are. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your attention. Thank you for joining me. Okay, my friends. Bye.